The stars burned cold and distant as the battle raged across the black void of space. Captain Jiho gripped the controls of his fighter craft, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool air inside his cockpit. Red warning lights flashed across his dashboard, and the metallic voice of his ship's computer called out damage reports in rapid succession. All around him, the war played out in bursts of plasma fire and silent explosions. Human ships, smaller and less advanced than their enemies, darted between the massive Velkin warships like insects attacking giants. Jiho had been fighting for 6 hours straight and his body screamed for rest. But rest meant death, and death meant his squadron would be one pilot short. He pulled hard on the stick, rolling his fighter to avoid a stream of purple energy that would have melted through his hull. His hands moved without thinking now, guided by 3 years of combat experience and countless close calls. The Velkins were winning this battle. They had more ships, better weapons, and technology that humanity could only dream of building. But humans had something else. They had stubbornness. Jiho locked onto a Velkin bomber that was moving toward the human carrier ship Firebase Horizon. His fingers found the trigger and twin streams of projectile fire leaped from his wing-mounted guns. The Velkin ship's shields flickered under the assault, then collapsed. His missiles finished the job and the bomber became another cloud of debris in the endless battlefield. His radio crackled to life. It was Commander Tae Young, his commanding officer aboard Firebase Horizon. The commander's voice was tight with stress. All fighters pull back to the carrier. We're taking too many losses. Retreat protocol is active. Jiho wanted to argue, but he knew better. Firebase Horizon was already trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. If they stayed much longer, the Velkins would destroy the carrier completely, and thousands of humans would die in the cold of space. He turned his fighter toward home and pushed his engines to maximum thrust. That was when the plasma bolt hit him. Jiho never saw it coming. One moment he was accelerating toward safety, and the next moment his entire world became fire and pain. The bolt punched through his right engine and exploded inside his ship's power core. His cockpit filled with smoke, and the artificial gravity failed, sending him floating against his restraints. Red emergency lights replaced the normal glow of his instruments. The computer's voice had become an endless scream of warnings. Hull breach. Life support failing. Navigation offline. Engines dead. Jiho fought with the controls, trying to stabilize his spinning fighter, but nothing responded. Through his cracked canopy, he watched Firebase Horizon jump to faster-than-light speed, abandoning the battlefield. The other human ships followed, disappearing one by one into the safety of hyperspace. The Velkin fleet was also retreating. They had won this battle and claimed this sector of space. They had no reason to hunt down a single crippled fighter when bigger prizes awaited them elsewhere. Jiho was alone. His fighter tumbled through space, pulled by the gravity of a nearby moon. He tried the emergency beacon, but the power systems were too damaged. He tried the backup communication array, but it had been destroyed in the explosion. His ship was dying around him and he was powerless to stop it. The moon grew larger in his view. It was called Karo 7 on the star maps, a barren rock with barely enough atmosphere to qualify as breathable. The surface was all gray stone and rust-colored dust with no water, no plants, no life of any kind. It existed in the contested zone between human and Velkin territory, claimed by neither side because it had nothing worth claiming. Jiho strapped himself in tight and angled his dead fighter as best he could with the maneuvering thrusters. They coughed and sputtered, giving him just enough control to aim for a flat area instead of a cliff face. It was all he could do. The fighter hit the surface at terrible speed. The impact threw Jiho forward against his restraints hard enough to crack 2 ribs. His head smashed into the control panel and warm blood ran down into his eyes. The fighter skipped like a stone on water, each bounce breaking away more pieces of hull and wing. Finally, after what felt like forever, the wreckage ground to a halt in a cloud of moon dust. Jiho hung in his seat, breathing hard. Every breath sent sharp pain through his chest from the broken ribs. His left arm was twisted at an odd angle, probably fractured. Blood continued to flow from the cut on his forehead, and he could taste copper in his mouth. He fumbled with his restraints and finally got them loose. The cockpit canopy was shattered, and the thin atmosphere of Karo 7 rushed in. Jiho pulled his emergency oxygen mask over his face. The air outside was breathable but thin, like being on top of a mountain back on Earth. He tried to stand, but his legs would not hold him. Jiho collapsed next to his ruined fighter and lay there in the dust, staring up at the black sky. Stars shone above him with the harsh clarity of a world with almost no atmosphere to soften their light. In the distance, he could see the flashes of the battle still raging in orbit, growing smaller as both fleets moved on to fight elsewhere. Nobody was coming for him. Even if Firebase Horizon made it back to human space, even if they sent a rescue mission, it would take weeks to return to this sector. Jiho did not have weeks. He had hours, maybe a day if he was lucky. Blood continued to flow from his wounds. His medical kit had been destroyed in the crash. His water supply was limited to the emergency pack on his belt. The broken ribs made every breath agony. Jiho closed his eyes. He had always known he would die in this war. Most human pilots did. The Velkans were simply too advanced, too powerful. Humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender only delayed the inevitable. But at least he had taken some of them with him. At least he had died protecting his people. The sound of footsteps crunching in the dust made his eyes snap open. Through his blurred vision, Jiho saw a figure approaching. The shape was wrong for a human. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent at slightly different angles. The figure wore armor the color of dried blood, the distinctive crimson of Velkan combat suits. Jiho tried to reach for his sidearm, but his broken arm would not respond. He tried to speak to curse his enemy, but only blood came from his mouth. The Velkan stood over him, blocking out the stars. Jiho waited for the killing shot, for the plasma bolt that would end his pain and finish what the crash had started. Instead, the Velkan knelt beside him. Gentle hands examined his wounds with surprising care. A medical scanner hummed to life, washing over his broken body with blue light. As consciousness began to slip away, Jiho heard a voice speaking in broken human language. The words were strange and accented, but he understood them. "You live, I make you live." Then darkness took him, and Jiho knew nothing more. Pain woke Jiho. It was different from the sharp agony of broken bones and torn flesh that he remembered. This pain was dull and distant, like his body belonged to someone else. He tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids felt heavy as stone. Slowly, awareness returned. He was lying on something soft, not the hard ground of the moon's surface. The air smelled strange, like metal and medicine and something else he could not identify. Machinery hummed somewhere nearby, and he heard the quiet drip of water echoing in an enclosed space. Jiho forced his eyes open. The ceiling above him was rough stone, natural rock that had been carved into a dome shape. Soft blue lights were attached to the walls, giving everything an underwater quality. He turned his head, and fresh pain shot through his neck. He was in a cave, he realized. Someone had brought him into a cave system beneath the moon's surface. His hand moved to his chest and found bandages wrapped tight around his ribs. His left arm was in a makeshift splint, and the bones felt like they had been set properly. The cut on his forehead had been cleaned and sealed with some kind of medical adhesive. Most surprising of all, he was still alive. "You wake." "Good." Jiho's head snapped toward the voice, and he immediately regretted the sudden movement. Standing near the entrance of the cave was a Velkan. The alien was tall and thin, maybe 7 feet in height, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light. Her face was angular, with large eyes that were completely black except for a ring of silver around each pupil. She wore the lower half of a Velkan combat suit, but the armor on her upper body had been removed, leaving only a tight gray undersuit that showed her alien physiology. Jiho tried to push himself up, tried to run or fight or do anything, but his body refused to obey. He was too weak, too injured. All he could do was stare at his enemy and wait for death. The Velkan raised her hands in what might have been a peaceful gesture. She spoke again in that broken human language, choosing her words carefully. "No fear. I help you. You very hurt." "I fix," Jiho found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why?" The Velkan tilted her head in a gesture that looked almost human. "Why I save enemy. I am medic, I save, is my purpose." She moved closer and Jiho tensed, but she only picked up a container of water and held it out to him. When he did not take it, she set it down within his reach and stepped back. "I am Nira, Velkan medical officer. My ship destroyed in battle. I am alone here like you." Jiho processed this information slowly. His mind was still clouded from whatever medication she had given him. "You're stranded too?" Nira nodded. "Yes, transport destroyed. Communication not work. Big storm in sky, block all signal. I cannot call my fleet. You cannot call your fleet. We are both stuck on this dead rock. She moved to sit on a flat stone across from his makeshift bed. In the better light, Jiho could see that she was injured as well. Her left leg was wrapped in bandages similar to his, and there was a dark bruise spreading across the side of her neck. "I find you in crashed ship," Nira continued. "You dying. Blood everywhere. Bones broken. I use my medical technology to save. Put small machines in your blood to fix damage from inside. You sleep for 2 days. 2 days." Jiho tried to sit up again and this time managed to prop himself against the cave wall. His head spun from the effort. "You could have left me to die. Why waste your medical supplies on a human?" Nira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "Because I am tired of death. I am medical officer, not soldier. I fix people. I do not kill them. The war makes everyone forget this difference." Jiho studied her face, trying to find the lie, the trap, the hidden danger. But all he saw was exhaustion. Nira looked as tired as he felt, as tired as every soldier he had ever known who had been fighting for too long. "How long until rescue?" he asked. "Storm last maybe 10 days, maybe 15. After storm end, one of our fleets maybe pick up distress signal. Maybe yours, maybe mine. We not know who come first. And if your fleet comes first," Nira met his eyes, "then you are prisoner. Maybe killed. I cannot stop this, and if my fleet comes first, then I am prisoner. Maybe killed. You cannot stop this." They sat in silence, each understanding the terrible position they were in. They needed each other to survive, but they were still enemies. When rescue came, one of them would likely die or face a fate worse than death. Jiho looked around the cave more carefully. He could see equipment salvaged from both their ships. A water recycling unit hummed in one corner. Food packages were stacked near the entrance, a mix of human and Velkan rations. His survival knife and sidearm were placed on a rock shelf far out of his reach, along with what looked like Velkan weapons. "You trust me with weapons nearby?" he asked. Nira made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You cannot walk, cannot fight. Weapons not matter now. Later, when you're stronger, maybe we talk about weapons." She stood and picked up a silver device that looked like a cross between a scanner and a medical injector. "I check your healing. The small machines need 2 more days to fix your bones. After that you can move. Not fight, but move." Nira ran the device over his body, reading information on a small screen. Jiho watched her work with professional efficiency, the same way he had seen human medics work on wounded soldiers. It was strange seeing that same dedication in an enemy. "Why did you become a medic?" he asked. Nira looked up from her scanner. "Family tradition. My mother was healer. Her mother was healer. I follow path. But Empire needs soldiers, so healers become military medical officers. I had no choice. You could have refused." "No. In Velkan Empire you do not refuse. Your caste decides your path. Your family decides your duty. Choice is not our way." Jiho thought about that. He had joined the military by choice to protect Earth and the colonies from Velkan invasion. He could have been a pilot for civilian ships or stayed on Earth or done 1,000 other things. Humans always had choices, even when all the choices were bad. "Is that why you're fighting us?" he asked. "Because you have no choice?" Nira set down her scanner and was quiet for a long time. "I fight because Empire says humans are dangerous. Says you are chaos that will destroy order of galaxy. Says you are primitives who steal what you cannot build." "And do you believe that?" She looked at him with those alien black and silver eyes. "I believe I'm tired. I believe this war has lasted too long. I believe I saved your life because I needed to remember what it feels like to heal instead of see death every day." Nira handed him a food package and a water container. "Eat, rest, we talk more later. Right now you need strength." Jiho took the food with his good hand. It was a Velkan ration pack, and the taste was strange and bitter, but it was food. He ate while Nira moved to the cave entrance and looked out at the barren landscape. "Storm coming again," she said. "Big one. We must stay inside for many hours." Jiho finished eating and lay back down. His body felt heavy with exhaustion, and the medication Nira had given him was pulling him back toward sleep. Before darkness took him again, he managed one more question. "Nira, if your fleet comes first, will you tell them about me?" She did not turn around. "I do not know. Ask me again in 10 days. It was not the answer Jiho wanted, but it was honest. As sleep claimed him once more, he realized he was alive because of an enemy's mercy. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it only made him more confused about everything he thought he knew about this war. The days blended together in the cave beneath Caro 7's surface. Jiho's body healed slowly but steadily, thanks to the Velkan medical technology working inside him. By the 4th day, he could stand and walk with only a slight limp. By the 6th day, the pain in his ribs had faded to a dull ache. Living with Nira became a careful routine of survival and mutual wariness. They divided the work between them based on their abilities. Nira handled the medical equipment and maintained the air recycling system with the precision her people were known for. Jiho, once he could move, took over food preparation and water management with the improvisational skills that came naturally to humans. The cave system was larger than Jiho had first realized. Nira had chosen this location because it had 3 chambers connected by narrow tunnels. The main chamber held their living area and most of their supplies. The second chamber contained their salvaged equipment and served as a workshop. The third was deeper underground and stayed warmer, so they used it for storage. On the 7th day, a radiation storm swept across the moon's surface. Jiho had been checking the exterior sensors when the alarms began screaming. Deadly particles from the system's distant sun, focused by the magnetic fields of the gas giant this moon orbited, were about to bombard everything outside. Inside. Now, Nira shouted from the main chamber. Jiho grabbed what supplies he could and scrambled back through the tunnel. Nira was already sealing the cave entrance with an emergency force field generator. The device hummed to life, creating a shimmering barrier between them and the outside world. They waited in the deeper chambers as the storm raged above. The walls of the cave itself provided some protection, but without the force field, the radiation would have killed them within hours. Jiho watched the power gauge on the generator slowly drain. "How long will it hold?" he asked. Nira checked her equipment. 8 hours. Maybe 9. Storm should last 6 hours according to sensor data. And if the storm lasts longer, then we have problem. They sat together in the dim light, rationing their power to keep only the most essential systems running. In the enforced stillness, they talked, not about the war or their peoples, but about smaller things, safer things. Jiho told her about Earth, about oceans and forests and cities that stretched toward the sky. He described rain, something that never fell on Karo 7's dead surface. He talked about food that humans ate, about music, about the feeling of natural sunlight on skin. Nira listened with what Jiho had learned to recognize as fascination. "Your world sounds very beautiful," she said, "full of chaos and life. You say chaos like it's a bad thing. For my people, chaos is bad. We value order, predictability. Everything has its place and purpose." "That sounds boring," Jiho said without thinking. Then he winced. "Sorry, I did not mean to insult your culture." But Nira made that sound that was almost a laugh. "Maybe you are right. Maybe it is boring. I never thought about it before." She told him about her homeworld, Velkara Prime. She described crystal towers that grew from living stone, gardens where every plant was positioned according to mathematical formulas, cities where millions of Velkans lived in perfect synchronized routine. It sounded beautiful in a cold, precise way. "Do you miss it?" Jiho asked. "Yes and no." Nira's large eyes reflected the blue emergency lights. "I miss the order, the knowing what comes next. But I do not miss feeling like a small piece in a very big machine." The storm passed after 7 hours and the force field held. They emerged from the deeper chambers to find that dust had piled against the cave entrance, and several of their exterior sensors had been destroyed by the radiation. It took both of them working together to dig out the entrance and repair what they could. That night, as they ate a meal of mixed human and Velkan rations, Jiho noticed that they had fallen into a comfortable pattern. Nira no longer tensed when he moved near her. He no longer slept with one eye open expecting an attack. The enemy sitting across from him had become something else. Not quite a friend, but not an enemy either. "I need to tell you something," Nira said suddenly. "The medical machines I put in you, they will stop working in maybe 5 days. Your body will reject them because you are not Velkan. When they stop, you must take them out or you will become sick. Can you remove them? Yes is not difficult, but you will need to rest for 1 day after, and your healing will be slower with only human biology." Jiho nodded. "Thank you for telling me. We are survival partners now. We must be honest." The word partners hung in the air between them. It felt significant somehow, an acknowledgement that they had crossed some invisible line from captor and prisoner to something more equal. Over the next days, they worked together to improve their shelter. Jiho showed Nira how to combine parts from their different technologies in ways that violated every engineering rule, but somehow worked anyway. He took a broken Velkin power cell, connected it to a human battery regulator using wire salvaged from his ship, and created a hybrid system that was more efficient than either component alone. Nira watched him work with confusion and growing amazement. This should not function. The power frequencies are not compatible, and yet it works. Jiho grinned. Human engineering is different from Velkin engineering. We don't always follow the rules, but rules exist for reason. They keep systems safe and predictable. Safe and predictable is good when everything goes according to plan. But when everything breaks, you need someone who knows how to make new rules. He taught her more human words, and she taught him Velkin phrases. They learned to understand each other better, not just in language, but in the way they thought. Jiho began to see that Velkin culture was not cold and emotionless as human propaganda claimed. It was just ordered differently, valuing stability over innovation, and Nira began to understand that human chaos was not random violence and stupidity. It was flexibility, creativity, the refusal to accept that something was impossible just because it had never been done before. On the 10th day, Jiho was examining their water recycling system when he noticed a problem. The unit was failing, and they would run out of drinking water in 3 days. He called Nira over to look. "The filter is damaged beyond repair," she said after scanning it. "We have no replacement parts. Standard procedure is to call for emergency extraction. We can't call for extraction. So what do we do instead?" Nira stared at the broken unit with the helplessness of someone whose training had not prepared her for this situation. "I do not know. Protocol says this is impossible to fix. Then we ignore protocol." Jiho was already pulling components out of the storage chamber. He found a fabric filter from his flight suit, a pressure valve from a Velkin medical scanner, and tubing from their air recycler. "Help me, I need your medical nanites." "For what purpose?" "Can they be programmed to collect specific molecules?" Nira's eyes widened. "Yes, but that is not their designed function." "But can they do it?" "Theoretically, yes." "Then let's make theory into reality." They worked together for hours. Jiho built a makeshift filter system, while Nira reprogrammed a small amount of medical nanites to specifically collect and separate clean water from contaminated liquid. The final result looked ridiculous, a twisted combination of parts that should never have been connected. Jiho poured contaminated water into the intake. They waited. Slowly, drop by drop, clean water began to drip from the output tube. Nira stared at it like she was seeing magic. "This is impossible. This violates 4 different engineering principles. And yet here we are with clean water." Jiho smiled. "Welcome to human problem solving. Your people do this often? Ignore rules and make things work anyway?" "Every single day." Nira was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I understand now why the Empire fears you. Not because you are strong or advanced, but because you do not accept limitations. You see a rule that says something cannot be done and you do it anyway. Is that so scary? To a culture built on order and predictability? Yes, very scary. Because if enough people start ignoring the rules, the entire system falls apart." Jiho thought about that as they refilled their water containers. Maybe that was the real reason for this war. Not resources or territory or any of the official reasons. Maybe the Velkin Empire feared humanity, because humans represented the one thing their ordered society could not tolerate. The possibility of change. As he lay down to sleep that night, Jiho realized he had not thought about rescue in days. Some part of him had begun to accept this strange new life in a cave with an alien who should be his enemy, but had become something much more complicated. The storm outside. The cave howled like it was asking a question neither of them was ready to answer. The morning of the 13th day began with a crisis. Jiho woke to the sound of alarms and Nira's voice calling his name with urgency. He stumbled from his sleeping area into the main chamber to find her staring at the environmental controls, with something close to panic on her alien features. "The life support system is failing," she said, her fingers moving rapidly across the Velkin control interface. "Temperature regulation is offline. In 6 hours, this cave will become too cold for either of us to survive." Jiho moved to her side and examined the readouts. The heating element that kept their cave at a survivable temperature had burned out. Without it, the natural temperature of Caro 7's underground would drop to well below freezing. Their emergency thermal suits might buy them a few extra hours, but not much more. What are the repair options? He asked. There are none. The heating element is a sealed Velkin military unit. It cannot be repaired, only replaced. And we have no replacement. Nira's voice was flat, defeated. Standard procedure is to evacuate to a backup location. We don't have a backup location. I know. Jiho studied the broken unit more carefully. It was typical Velkin design. Elegant and efficient, but impossible to service in the field. The entire thing was designed to either work perfectly or fail completely, with no middle ground. It was the opposite of human engineering, where everything was held together with improvisation and hope. We need heat, he said, thinking out loud. We have power from the reactors. We just need a way to turn that power into heat safely. That is what the heating element does. Without it, we cannot generate heat without also generating toxic byproducts or risking explosion. Jiho walked around the cave, looking at their scattered equipment with new eyes. Somewhere in this collection of salvaged parts there had to be a solution. Humans had survived in impossible situations for their entire history. Cold caves had been humanity's home for thousands of years before they reached the stars. His eyes fell on the collection of damaged equipment in the corner. Power cells, wire, metal plating from both ships, tools and components that had been too broken to use but too valuable to throw away. I have an idea, he said, but it's going to seem crazy. All your ideas seem crazy, Nira replied. They also seem to work. Over the next hours, Jiho built something that would have horrified any trained engineer. He took heating coils from 3 different destroyed systems, wired them in a series that should not have been possible, and connected them to a power regulator that he modified to run far outside its safe parameters. He used metal plating to create a crude heat exchanger and added sensors from a medical scanner to monitor temperature. Nira watched with growing concern. This design is very dangerous. If the power regulator fails, the entire system could explode. Then we make sure it doesn't fail. But there are no safety mechanisms, no automatic shutoffs, no redundant systems, which means we'll have to monitor it ourselves. We'll take shifts, someone always watching, always ready to cut power if something goes wrong. This is against every safety protocol, every engineering standard. Jiho looked up at her. Do you want to be safe by the rules or do you want to be alive? Nira had no answer for that. They installed the makeshift heating system in the main chamber. Jiho connected the final wire with hands that were already starting to shake from the growing cold. He took a deep breath and activated the power. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the heating coils began to glow with a soft orange light. The temperature gauge started to rise. 1 degree, then 2, then 5. The device held together, pouring warmth into the cave like a miracle. Nira ran her scanner over every component, checking for signs of failure. This should not work. The power distribution is completely unbalanced. The heat output varies by 15%. By all engineering logic, this should have failed immediately. But it didn't fail. It worked. Jiho sat down heavily, exhausted from the effort and the stress. Sometimes the best solution is the one that ignores logic. They took turns monitoring the heating system throughout the day and into the night. Jiho explained to Nira how to recognize the warning signs of failure, what sounds meant danger, which fluctuations were normal and which meant immediate shutdown. She learned quickly, her systematic mind adapting to this chaotic new way of thinking. During his watch shift that night, Nira sat with him instead of sleeping. The orange glow of the heating coils cast strange shadows on the cave walls. I need to understand something, she said. Your entire species approaches problems this way? Making solutions that violate rules and safety standards? Pretty much. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years. When we first left Earth, our ships were barely functional. We didn't have technology as good as yours, but we built them anyway and flew them to other stars because we refused to wait until everything was perfect. That is insane. Maybe, but it's also why we're still here. We don't wait for permission or perfect conditions. We see something that needs doing and we figure out how to do it with whatever we have. Nira was quiet, processing this. The Empire calls this recklessness. We are taught that your species is primitive because you do not follow proper procedures. And what do you think now? After living with me for 13 days? She looked at the heating system, at the hybrid water recycler, at all the impossible things Jiho had built that kept them alive. I think maybe recklessness and courage look very similar from the outside. I think maybe the Empire is wrong about many things. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. For a Velkan to question the Empire was significant. Their entire culture was built on obedience to authority and trust in the system. "What made you change your mind?" Jiho asked. "You did. And your impossible machines. I was taught that following rules keeps us safe. But we are only alive now because you broke every rule. You have shown me that sometimes the rules do not help. Sometimes they just limit what we think is possible." Over the next days, something shifted in their dynamic. Nira began to ask Jiho to teach her his approach to problems. She wanted to understand how humans could look at a broken system and see opportunity instead of failure. He showed her how to think creatively, how to see past the original purpose of an object to what else it might become. In return, she taught him Velkan methodology, the careful systematic analysis that her people excelled at. She showed him how to calculate precise probabilities, how to identify the most efficient solution among many options, how to build systems that were stable and reliable. They began to combine their approaches, creating something new. Jiho would come up with wild, impossible ideas, and Nira would find ways to make them more stable and safe. She would identify problems with mathematical precision, and he would create solutions that had never existed before. One day, Jiho was working on improving their communication array when he made a breakthrough. By combining human improvisation with Velkan precision, he managed to boost the signal strength by 40%. It still was not enough to punch through the electromagnetic storms, but it was progress. Nira examined his work with something like pride. "You are learning Velkan engineering principles. This design is much more stable than your previous work. And you're learning to think like a human. You suggested combining those two incompatible systems yesterday." "Did I?" She seemed surprised. "I suppose I did. It felt natural." They smiled at each other, recognizing that they had both changed. The lines between human and Velkan, between chaos and order, had become blurred. They were becoming something neither of their peoples had words for. That night, another storm hit. But this time, Jiho and Nira stood together at the cave entrance, watching the radiation and dust sweep across the barren landscape. The force field held strong, powered by their hybrid systems. The heating unit kept the cave warm. The water recycler provided clean drinking water. "We are a good survival team," Nira said. "We are," Jiho agreed. "Makes me wonder what we could accomplish if our peoples worked together instead of fighting. That is impossible. The war has lasted too long, too much death on both sides. 2 weeks ago, this heating system was impossible. That water recycler was impossible. Us standing here talking like friends was impossible." Jiho turned to look at her. "Maybe impossible just means nobody has tried hard enough yet." Nira met his eyes, and in the reflected light of the storm, Jiho saw something he had never expected to see in a Velkan. "Hope? Maybe you are right," she said softly. "Maybe humans see impossible things and do them anyway because you do not know you are supposed to fail." "That's the secret," Jiho said. "We fail all the time. We just refuse to stay failed." The storm raged on into the night. But inside the cave, two former enemies sat together in warmth and safety, protected by machines that should not exist, discussing possibilities that neither of their peoples would believe. And for the first time since the war began, both of them wondered if maybe, just maybe, there could be a different ending to this story than the one everyone expected. The 15th day arrived with deceptive calm. Jiho woke to find Nira already awake, sitting motionless in front of the communication equipment. Something about her posture made his chest tighten with worry. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving to join her. She did not look at him. Her large black and silver eyes were fixed on the display screen. "The electromagnetic storm is weakening. In maybe 6 hours it will be clear enough to send messages." Jiho should have felt relief. Rescue was finally possible. Instead, a cold weight settled in his stomach. "That's good news, isn't it, is it?" Nira's voice was barely above a whisper. They both understood the problem. Once communication was possible, they would need to send distress signals, and whoever responded first would determine their fates. If a human ship arrived, Nira would become a prisoner of war, possibly executed as an enemy soldier. If a Velkan ship arrived, Jiho would face the same fate. The comfortable partnership they had built over 15 days was about to end, one way or another. "We could wait," Jiho suggested. "Not send any signal. Stay here until supplies run low, and then what? We die together in this cave? That is not survival. That is just slower death." She was right, and they both knew it. Their supplies would last maybe another month. The heating system Jiho had built was already showing signs of stress. The water recycler would fail eventually. They could not stay here forever. Jiho sat beside her and stared at the communication equipment. 15 days ago, the choice would have been simple: survival, rescue, home. But now nothing felt simple anymore. "I need to check something," Nira said suddenly. She activated the passive sensors, the ones that listened without broadcasting. For several minutes she worked in silence, her fingers moving across the Velkin interface with practiced efficiency. Then she stopped. Her entire body went rigid. "What is it?" Jiho asked. "There is already a signal. A Velkin military transmission. They are broadcasting on encrypted channels." She worked the controls, her movements becoming more frantic. "It is a fleet. A large one. They are coming to this sector." "Coming here? To Caro 7? "No, they are passing through this system. But they will be close enough to detect a distress signal. They will arrive in approximately 40 hours. Jiho felt his heart sink. "What about human ships? Do you detect any?" Nira shook her head. "Nothing. The human fleet is far away. If I send a distress signal now, only the Velkin fleet will hear it." The cave fell into heavy silence. They both understood what this meant. Nira could signal her people, be rescued, and return home. She would be safe. Jiho would become a prisoner, interrogated for military intelligence, possibly executed, or she could stay silent. Let the Velkin fleet pass, hope that a human ship came close enough to detect them later. But there was no guarantee that would happen. They might wait for weeks or months, slowly dying in this cave. "You should send the signal," Jiho said finally. "It's your best chance of survival." "And what about you?" "I'm a soldier. I knew the risks when I enlisted." "You have a chance to go home, Nira. Take it." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes he had never seen before. Pain, maybe, or regret. "You would tell me to abandon you? After everything?" "I'm not asking you to abandon me. I'm telling you to save yourself." "That's different, is it?" Her voice was sharp. "You humans, with your impossible ideas and your refusal to accept failure. Now you ask me to accept that you will die or be captured. I'm asking you to survive. That's what we've been doing for 15 days, surviving." Nira stood abruptly and walked to the far side of the cave. Her hands were shaking, Jiho realized. He had never seen her lose her composure before. "You do not understand," she said. "In Velkin culture, duty is everything. I should signal my fleet immediately. I should report that I found an enemy soldier and kept him alive for interrogation. That is my duty to the Empire. Then do your duty. But I also have a duty to you. You saved my life as much as I saved yours. Your machines keep us warm and give us water. You taught me to think differently, to see possibilities where I saw only rules. How can I repay that by sending you to die?" Jiho crossed the cave to stand beside her. "You don't owe me anything, Nira. You already saved my life. Whatever happens now, we're even." "Even? This is not about being even. This is about—" She stopped, struggling with words in a language that was not her own. "This is about friendship. You are my friend, Jiho. I think maybe the only real friend I ever had. And friends do not send friends to die." The word friend hung between them, more powerful than any weapon. In 15 days, they had become something that should have been impossible. Two soldiers from warring species finding common ground in a cave on a dead moon. "What do you want to do?" Jiho asked quietly. Nira was silent for a long time. Then she returned to the communication equipment and began working. Her fingers moved with purpose now, entering commands into the system. "I will send the signal to my fleet," she said. "But I will lie." "What?" "I will report that I am stranded and need rescue. But I will say that this moon is clear of enemy presence. I will say that I have detected no human ships or soldiers. They'll scan the area when they arrive. They'll find my ship's wreckage. Then I will say I found only wreckage, no survivors. The crash was too violent." She looked at him with determination. "I will hide you. When they come, you will stay in the deep chamber. I will seal it and tell them it is unstable, dangerous to enter. They will believe me because I am their officer and they have no reason to doubt. And if they don't believe you, if they search anyway, then I will deal with that when it happens. But I will not send you to die without trying to save you first." Jiho grabbed her arm. "Nira, if they discover you lied, you'll be punished. They might execute you for treason." "Yes, I know." She met his eyes calmly. "But you taught me something important. Sometimes the rules do not matter. Sometimes you must do what is right, even when it is impossible and dangerous. This is different. This is treason against your own people. Is it? Or is it refusing to participate in a war that I no longer believe is right? She pulled up the transmission interface. I have spent 15 days learning to think like a human. Now I will act like one. I will see this impossible situation and refuse to accept the obvious solution. You could die. I could, but I would rather die trying to save a friend than live knowing I betrayed him. Her fingers hovered over the controls. Unless you tell me not to do this. If you order me to send the true report, I will do it, but the choice must be yours. Jiho looked at this alien woman who had saved his life, who had become his partner in survival, who was now willing to risk everything for him. He thought about all the propaganda he had heard about Velkans being cold and emotionless, about them being incapable of real loyalty or compassion. It had all been lies. Send the message, he said, and thank you. Nira nodded and activated the transmission. They watched together as the encrypted signal was sent into space, carrying a lie that could save them both or doom them together. For the next 2 days, they prepared. Jiho moved all his personal equipment into the deepest chamber, along with anything that might identify him as human. Nira showed him how to operate the Velkan force field generator, so he could seal himself in from the inside. They practiced the plan until both of them could execute it perfectly. On the second night, as they sat together for what might be their last shared meal, Jiho asked the question that had been bothering him. Why are you doing this, really? We've only known each other 15 days. Nira thought about it for a long moment. Because you showed me that everything I was taught about humans was wrong. You are not chaotic primitives. You are creative and brave and loyal. You see impossible problems and make them possible. And if I was wrong about humans, maybe my empire is wrong about this war. One person doesn't represent an entire species. No. But one person can change how another person sees the world. You changed how I see things, Jiho. You made me question everything I believed. She smiled, a strange expression on her alien features. Maybe that is the most human thing of all. Making others question what they think they know. They sat in comfortable silence, two friends facing an uncertain future. Above them, somewhere in the black void of space, a Velkan fleet was approaching. In 40 hours, they would know if Nira's plan would work. If it succeeded, Jiho would remain hidden, and Nira would rejoin her people, carrying the secret of his survival. If it failed, they would both pay the price for choosing friendship over duty. But as Jiho looked at Nira's determined face in the soft light of their impossible heating system, he realized something important. Win or lose, live or die, these 15 days had proven something that neither of their peoples wanted to believe. Humans and Velkans could be friends. They could work together, learn from each other, and care about each other's survival. And if two soldiers in a cave could do that, maybe entire civilizations could too. It was an impossible thought. But Jiho had learned that impossible just meant nobody had tried hard enough yet. Sometimes change started with just two people deciding that the Velkan ships appeared in orbit exactly when predicted. Jiho watched from the deep chamber through a small monitor that Nira had rigged up, showing the feed from the cave's exterior sensors. 3 ships, sleek and red like dried blood, descended through the thin atmosphere of Karo 7. Remember the plan, Nira said through the communication link. She was in the main chamber preparing to meet her rescuers. Stay silent no matter what you hear. The chamber is shielded. Their sensors cannot detect you unless they physically enter. Understood. Good luck, Nira. Luck is a human concept. But thank you. Jiho sealed the chamber entrance from the inside and activated the force field. The barrier hummed to life, invisible but powerful enough to make the Velkans think twice about forcing entry. On the monitor, he watched the Velkan ships land near the cave entrance. Soldiers emerged, their crimson armor gleaming in the weak sunlight. They moved with the precise coordination that Velkan military training produced. Every step calculated, every action purposeful. Jiho counted 12 of them, plus what looked like an officer wearing more elaborate armor. Nira emerged from the cave to meet them. Through the audio pickup, Jiho heard her speaking in the Velkan language. He could not understand the words, but he recognized the calm authority in her voice. She was playing her role perfectly, the stranded officer grateful for rescue. The Velkan officer responded. Their conversation went back and forth for several minutes. Jiho's hands clenched into fists. unable to do anything but watch and listen to words he could not understand. Then the Velkins began to move toward the cave entrance. Jiho's heart raced. They were going to search the cave. He pressed himself against the back wall of the deep chamber, making himself as small as possible. The soldiers moved through the main chamber, their weapons scanning everything. Jiho watched on the monitor as they examined the hybrid equipment he had built. One soldier pointed to the heating system, clearly confused by its unusual design. Another picked up a piece of salvage that was obviously human technology. The officer called out to Nira. She responded quickly, gesturing at the wreckage of her transport visible outside the cave. Jiho understood the story she was telling. She had salvaged what she could from both crash sites. It was a logical explanation, one that fit the evidence. The soldiers moved deeper into the cave system. They were getting close to the deep chamber. Jiho held his breath as one of them approached the sealed entrance. The soldier raised a scanner and ran it over the force field. Through the link, Jiho heard Nira speaking urgently. She was warning them about the instability of that chamber, the danger of the rocks collapsing, the reason she had sealed it. The soldier hesitated, then turned to the officer. The officer studied the readings on the scanner. The moment stretched out like hours. Then the officer made a gesture, and the soldiers moved away from the sealed chamber. Jiho let out a breath he had not realized he was holding, but his relief was short-lived. Through the audio pickup he heard a new sound. Explosions, weapons fire, and then alarms blaring from the Velkin ships outside. On the monitor he saw the Velkin soldiers running back toward the cave entrance, shouting in their language. The officer was barking orders. Something was happening outside. Then Jiho saw it, human fighters screaming across the sky, firing on the Velkin ships. Plasma bolts and missiles tore through the air. One of the Velkin ships exploded in a ball of fire. His people had found him. Somehow a human rescue patrol had detected his emergency beacon, but they had arrived at the worst possible time. The cave shook as the battle raged outside. The Velkin soldiers took defensive positions, firing at targets Jiho could not see. Nira was shouting something, but her words were lost in the chaos of combat. Jiho made a decision. He could not stay hidden while a battle raged and Nira was in danger. He deactivated the force field and forced open the sealed chamber entrance. The cave was full of smoke and dust. Jiho grabbed his sidearm from where Nira had stored it and ran toward the main chamber. He emerged to find Velkin soldiers firing at human troops who were advancing on the cave entrance. And there, in the middle of the firefight, was Nira. She was not fighting. She was standing with her hands raised, trying to signal that she was not a threat. But in the chaos, nobody was paying attention to her signals. Jiho saw a human soldier taking aim at her. Time seemed to slow. He could not let this happen. "Not after everything. Hold fire," Jiho shouted in human language, running between Nira and the human soldier. "She's friendly." "Don't shoot!" The human soldier's eyes went wide with shock. "Captain Jiho? You're alive? Stand down. The Velkin medic is not hostile." The human soldier lowered her weapon, confused but obedient. Jiho recognized her. Lieutenant Bora from his squadron. She had led a rescue mission to find him, but the Velkin soldiers did not understand what was happening. They saw a human protecting their medical officer and assumed he was a threat. One of them raised a weapon toward Jiho. Nira moved faster than Jiho thought possible. She threw herself in front of him, shouting in Velkin. The soldier hesitated, clearly confused about why their medical officer was protecting an enemy. "Cease fire," the Velkin officer commanded. "Hold positions." The shooting stopped. Both sides faced each other across the cave entrance, weapons raised but nobody firing. The tension was thick enough to cut. Bora kept her weapon trained on the Velkins but spoke to Jiho. "Captain, what is happening here? Why are you defending an enemy soldier?" "Because she saved my life. She kept me alive for 15 days. She's not the enemy, Bora. She's Velkin. That makes her the enemy by definition." "Definitions can be wrong." Jiho stepped forward, positioning himself where both sides could see him clearly. "I'm ordering you to stand down, Lieutenant. This Velkin officer has valuable intelligence and has requested asylum with human forces." It was a lie. But Jiho hoped Nira would understand and play along. She did, immediately nodding and speaking in broken human language. "I want asylum. I have information about Velkin military. I help humans in exchange for protection." The Velkin officer responded in his own language, clearly demanding that Nira return to her people. She shouted back, her voice filled with a conviction that was not entirely an act. I will not go back to fight a war I do not believe in. This human showed me truth. The Empire has lied to us about many things. I choose different path. The Velkin officer's weapon rose. For a terrible moment, Jiho thought he would shoot Nira for treason. But Bora was faster. She fired a warning shot that struck the ground near the Velkin officer's feet. Next one goes through your armor, Bora said coldly. Drop your weapons or we all die here today. The standoff continued for several heartbeats. Then the Velkin officer made a gesture, and his soldiers lowered their weapons. They were outnumbered and outgunned, with one of their ships destroyed and the others damaged. Take her, the Velkin officer said in broken human language. Take the traitor. She is dead to the Empire now. We will not waste resources to retrieve her. Bora's squad moved forward carefully, covering the Velkins while pulling Jiho and Nira back toward their own positions. The human transport had landed a short distance from the cave, its weapons still tracking the remaining Velkin ships. As they moved toward safety, Bora spoke quietly to Jiho. I hope you know what you're doing, Captain. Command is going to have a lot of questions about this. I know, but she deserves a chance, Bora. She's not like them. Bora looked at Nira with suspicion and something that might have been curiosity. She better be worth it. You're putting your career on the line for her. They reached the transport and climbed aboard. The pilot wasted no time lifting off, accelerating away from the surface as the Velkin ships fired parting shots that missed by wide margins. Within minutes, they had jumped to faster-than-light speed and left Caro 7 behind. Jiho and Nira sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by human soldiers who watched the Velkin with weapons ready. Nira looked small and vulnerable without her armor, alone among enemies who had every reason to hate her, but she held her head high and met their stares with dignity. Thank you, she said quietly to Jiho. You did not have to reveal yourself. You could have stayed hidden and been safe. We're partners, remember? Partners don't leave each other behind. Bora overheard this and shook her head. Partners with a Velkin. I never thought I'd see the day. Command is definitely going to love this. The transport carried them through hyperspace toward the human fleet. Jiho knew that the hard part was just beginning. He would need to convince his superiors that Nira was valuable, that she could be trusted, that she deserved protection despite being an enemy soldier. It seemed impossible, but Jiho had learned something over 15 days in a cave. Impossible just meant nobody had tried hard enough yet. He looked at Nira and saw his friend, the person who had saved his life and chosen to betray her empire rather than betray their friendship. If he could convince one Velkin to see humans differently, maybe he could convince humans to see one Velkin differently too. The transport jumped through hyperspace, carrying two soldiers who had been enemies and became friends, heading toward a future that neither of them could predict, but both of them were willing to face together. Because sometimes the most human thing possible. The interrogation room was cold and sterile, everything painted in shades of gray. Jiho sat at a metal table across from three human military officers who looked at him with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. General Dong-hyun, the fleet commander, tapped his fingers on the table in an irritated rhythm. Let me understand this correctly, Captain, the general said. You want us to grant asylum to a Velkin officer, an enemy combatant, because she saved your life and you became friends, that's correct, sir? And you expect us to believe that she has valuable intelligence worth the political nightmare of harboring an enemy soldier? She does, sir. She's been willing to share everything she knows about Velkin fleet movements, military protocols, and strategic planning. The female officer to the general's left, Commander Haewon, leaned forward. Or she's a spy planted to feed us false information. Have you considered that possibility, Captain? I have, ma'am, but I've spent 15 days with her. I've seen her question her own empire's propaganda. I've watched her risk her life to protect me when she could have easily let me die or turned me over to her people. Sentiment is not intelligence, General Dong-hyun said flatly. What specifically has she told you that's worth the considerable resources we're spending to protect her? Jiho took a deep breath. This was the moment. She's told me about something called the Syndicate Collective. According to her, they're a third party that's been manipulating both humans and Velkins into continuing this war. The three officers exchanged glances, Commander Haywan made a note on her datapad. Go on. The collective is a group of merchants and weapons manufacturers from multiple species. They sell advanced weapons to both sides while carefully managing the conflict to prevent either side from winning decisively. They profit from the war continuing indefinitely. That's a serious accusation, the third officer said, and it sounds convenient. The enemy claims a shadowy organization is the real villain, absolving them of responsibility. I thought the same thing at first, sir, but Nira has provided specific names, transaction records she accessed while serving as a medical officer on supply ships, and communication intercepts that show Velkan Military Command receiving weapons from the same suppliers that sell to us. General Dong-hyun leaned back in his chair. If this is true, why would a medical officer have access to this kind of sensitive intelligence? She didn't seek it out, sir. She stumbled across it while treating a wounded intelligence officer who was delirious from pain medication. He spoke about things he shouldn't have, and Nira started investigating. That's part of why she was willing to defect. She discovered her empire was being manipulated. Or she's very good at creating a believable cover story. With respect, sir, I believe her, and I'm asking permission to let her present this information to military intelligence. Let the experts verify it. If she's lying, they'll know. Commander Haywan spoke up. Even if this information proves accurate, you understand the position this puts us in, Captain? We're at war with the Velkans. Harboring one of their officers, even a defector, will be seen as weak by our own people and provocative by theirs. I understand, ma'am, but if there's even a chance that this war is being artificially prolonged by outside forces, don't we have an obligation to investigate? The general stood and walked to the window, looking out at the human fleet spread across the void. You've put us in an impossible situation, Captain Jiho. If we reject this Velkan's information, we might miss a chance to end the war. If we accept it and it proves false, we've wasted valuable resources and given the enemy propaganda victory. Sir, I spent 15 days learning that most of what we've been told about Velkans is wrong. They're not emotionless machines. They're not fundamentally evil. They're people just like us caught up in a war that neither side fully understands anymore. That's a nice sentiment, Captain. But sentiment doesn't win wars, no sir. But understanding your enemy does. And maybe understanding that your enemy isn't really your enemy at all is the first step toward something better than endless war. General Dong-hyun turned back to face him. You've changed, Captain. 15 days ago, you were a loyal soldier who followed orders and killed the enemy without question. Now you sound like a peace activist. I sound like someone who's seen a different possibility, sir. Someone who's learned that impossible things can become possible if you're willing to try. The general studied Jiho for a long moment. Then he sighed. Against my better judgment, I'm going to allow this. Your Velkan friend will be interviewed by military intelligence. If her information proves valuable and verifiable, we'll consider what to do next. But understand this, Captain. You're personally responsible for her. If she betrays us, if she causes any harm to this fleet or its personnel, the consequences will fall on you. I understand, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still need to convince intelligence that she's legitimate. And after that, you'll need to convince the civilian government that working with a Velkan defector is worth the political cost. The meeting ended, and Jiho was escorted back to the detention area where Nira was being held. She sat alone in a small room, her alien features composed despite being surrounded by enemies. When Jiho entered, she looked up with those large black and silver eyes. They agreed to listen, Jiho said. Intelligence officers will interview you tomorrow, and if they do not believe me, then we try again. We keep trying until someone listens. Nira managed a small smile. Very human approach. Refused to accept failure. Over the next 3 days, Nira underwent intensive interviews with human intelligence officers. Jiho was not allowed to be present, but he waited anxiously for news. The officers were thorough, checking every detail of her story, verifying what they could against their own intelligence databases. On the 4th day, Commander Haywan summoned Jiho to her office. She looked tired but also excited in a way he had not seen before. Your Velkan friend's information checks out, Haywan said without preamble. We've cross-referenced her data with our own intelligence, and there are too many correlations to be coincidence. The Syndicate Collective appears to be real, so what happens now? Now we have a problem. If we expose the Collective, we risk them disappearing and taking their proof with them. But if we do nothing, the war continues and more people die. Haywan pulled up a star map on her display. Your friend has suggested something radical. She wants to make contact with Velkan dissidents who might also have discovered this manipulation. She thinks there are others like her who question the war. Can we do that? Make contact with the enemy? It's dangerous and probably illegal under current military law. But if it works, if we can find Velkans who are willing to work with us, we might be able to expose the collective together. Present undeniable evidence to both our peoples. That sounds impossible. Haywan smiled. I've read your report about the 15 days on Caro 7, Captain. You seem to specialize in impossible things. Over the next weeks, a plan took shape. Nira would record a message to be transmitted on secure Velkan channels, reaching out to military personnel who might share her doubts. It was a long shot, but it was a start. The day they prepared to send the transmission, Jiho stood with Nira in the communication center. She had written her message carefully, choosing words that would resonate with Velkans who valued duty but also truth. Are you sure about this? Jiho asked. Once you send this, there's no going back. You'll be openly calling for Velkans to question their empire. I am sure. You taught me that sometimes the right choice is the impossible one. She looked at him with affection. Besides, you humans say that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is our first step. Not just yours. Ours. We're in this together now. Nira activated the transmission. Her message went out into the void, carried on Velkan military frequencies, speaking truth to those who might be ready to hear it. She spoke of manipulation and lies, of manufactured conflict and unnecessary death. She spoke of a human who showed her kindness when he should have been her enemy. They did not know if anyone would respond. They did not know if this desperate gambit would work. But they had tried, and that was what mattered. 3 days later, the first response came. Then another, then more. Velkan officers and soldiers scattered across different ships and installations, reaching out in secret to say they had also found evidence of the collective. They had also questioned the war. They were willing to work together to expose the truth. General Dong Hyun called a meeting of his senior staff. Jiho and Nira were both present, an unprecedented sight. A human captain and a Velkan defector, standing before human military command as equals. We have a situation, the general said. Thanks to Captain Jiho and Officer Nira, we now have the beginning of a network of Velkan dissidents willing to share intelligence. More importantly, we have evidence that both our species have been manipulated into a war that serves neither of our interests. He pulled up the data on the main screen. Names, transaction records, communication intercepts, all pointing to the Syndicate Collective and their carefully orchestrated war profiteering. The question now is, what we do with this information. We could use it as propaganda.